How many of you have, just wanted to check, how many of you have seen that viral video that's out right now with the two dog, did we lose me? We got me, okay. The two dog drone robots, it's on YouTube right now. Raise your hand if you've seen that video. One opens a door after having been called in back. All right, so that's a type of robot, obviously. We'll be talking about a different type of robot today, but we'll be comparing that one and some others with that of Kindred and George here. So George is with Kindred. It's an AGI company. All right, so tell me about Kindred. Tell me about what an AGI company is. I have an idea already, but a lot of people would love to hear it from you.
Hi everyone, George Babu. AGI stands for Artificial General Intelligence. So the company's mission is to create human-like intelligence in machines. And AGI is the idea that you can create a general purpose algorithm that allows a robot to learn any task that a human does with the same algorithm.
Awesome, yeah. So we know what those dog drone robots look like. We've seen some of those other Boston Dynamic robots. They're like sort of the Tesla of the, like they're just, you see them all the time. But what do your robots look like? Just describe them. And what do they do?
So the company's about 4 years old, and over the 4 years we've built lots of different types of robots. So the ones that are commercially available, the ones that are public, they look like any robot you might see in a factory. So it looks like a regular industrial arm. It kind of moves around like a human arm, and it's used to do some work in fulfillment centers. Internally, we have robots of every imaginable shape. So we have humanoid robots with legs. We have humanoid robots on wheels. We have four-legged robots actually internally. We have worm-like robots. And essentially, the idea is, again, we're trying to create algorithms that allow the robots to learn, any type of robot, to learn any type of task. So that's why we have all these different types doing different types of things.
Okay, so keep that in mind. You guys have the robots that learn how to do stuff that it's been told to do.
Exactly.
And the robots that were on YouTube, that if you want to check it out, it's trending on YouTube. It's these two dog drone type robots. They do something different. They aren't actually figuring anything. I didn't know this, I must admit. I assumed that these dog drone robots were figuring, like one of them opens a door, one calls the other in for backup. I thought that they were that they could figure it out themselves, and that's what they were doing. Turns out they weren't really doing that. They're executing. That's a different type of robot completely. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between what your robots do and how those are?
Sure. I think a good analogy would be, we'll start with the analogy of programming, right? So if you think about how we get computers to do things, we started with programming and we told the computer what to do. So if you see a patch of green, it's probably a tree, right? So that was stage one. So you program computer to recognize an image. Then we started teaching the robots to look for green spots and brown spots and all that kind of stuff. So we used like early machine learning. And modern machine learning, it learns what to look for in an image, right? So it's kind of the three differences. Similarly, in robots, most robots that have been around for the last 30, 40 years, you program it what to do. You say, go from point A to point B, move to X, Y spot, and then open the gripper, close the gripper, blah, blah, blah. So it's a program sequence. So every factory has these gigantic scripts telling the robot exactly what to do. The second generation of robots, you take some pieces of that task and replace it with machine learning or computer vision, what have you. So you'll say move roughly here and look for a screw and then open the gripper, right? Or in the dog case, you'll say look for something that looks like a handle and then go do this action, right? The third, what's coming down the pipe, what we're working on, is you don't program the robot what to do, and you don't use machine learning, computer vision, or anything. You tell it what you want the outcome to be. So we would, in our case, we would say, open the door, and we would give the robot the ability to move its arms around, open and close its grippers, and then we'll give it a few days or weeks to just try different things to maximize the reward when it opens the door. So that's the third generation. So first generation, go ABC. Second generation, ABC, but then you have a little bit of machine learning in the middle. Third generation, you just tell it what you want it to do, and then it learns.
All right, and what's the fourth generation? What are a few of the things that you see happening in the future, in the next 5-10 years?
I think like if I think for the next 10 years, what we are seeing is that there's essentially a global labor shortage. Like you look everywhere from China to India to the U.S., Canada, Mexico. There is actually a big labor shortage. People either are not available to do work, or that there's jobs they don't want to do. And these are all tasks that have to happen in the physical world. You can't virtualize a coat hanger or a warehouse worker or a manufacturer. You have to do it in the physical world. So I think what's coming down the pipe is a lot more demand from customers for robotic solutions to do the things they're doing. Whatever it is, whether it's in the home, bringing you a beer, whether it's in a store, bringing you shoes to try on, or in the warehouse, getting an order ready to ship out. Cars, self-driving cars, drones, like all those are different types of robots, right? So there's a lot more demand for that.
Totally. So your robots, let's talk about specifically what the current ones that you're working on. The program is called SORT, right? So SORT is the name of the machine learning sort of, what exactly does SORT refer to? The robots themselves or the robots themselves, yeah. So these are big, typical robot arms that you see, and what are they doing?
So what they're doing right now is actually preparing orders that get shipped out. So if you place an order at Gap of a bunch of clothes, well, someone has to go to a shelf, pick it up, put it into a box, and ship it to you. So our robot sits before the shipping stage and assembles your order from the things that are available to be for that order. So it picks it up, scans it, says, oh, it belongs to your order, I'll put it here. Picks up the second item, that belongs to somebody else's order, puts it there. So it does that throughout the day.
And then human beings pick it up from there. So it fits like one spot in a, yeah.
Correct, yeah.
Awesome. So you're working with Gap and a few other companies like that. You've gotten to this point. Let's sort of rewind a bit and go to sort of the beginning. Did you see that this was an issue? Like, how did you know that this specific, sorting of clothing or other items in a big factory, warehouse, store, or whatever, did you see that early on as being an area that the robots would be needed for that? Or did you, early on when you started Kindred, what were you thinking with you and your founders? How did you guys get started then?
So I think like many entrepreneurial startup stories,
this was in Toronto, right? Or this was in Toronto.
So I was at a venture fund before this, a Canadian venture fund, and about 4 or 5 years ago. And we just started seeing a lot of machine learning startups come in. People were using machine learning for this, machine learning for that. And we started seeing, Jeff Bezos started talking about drone deliveries. Google was talking about self-driving cars. So I was just seeing this pattern of things happening in machine learning that just was supposed to be not possible, like a car driving itself or a plane flying itself. And I just got excited, and it was too early to invest in that area. But it wasn't too early to start a company there. So we literally started the company on a very vague idea that we wanted to take machine learning and AI, put it into physical robots, and do stuff with it. The first things we were trying to do was actually to build Rosie the robot. So we wanted to build a home personal assistant. So we designed a humanoid robot, and we did a bunch of tests with it. And then we moved away from that market and looked at a whole bunch of other markets. Looked at about 200 different use cases, spoke to hundreds of people, everywhere from Flextronics to automotive manufacturers to hospitals to homes. So we did this kind of a customer development exercise. So I spoke to 200 different use cases, 100 different people, 6 different industries, and then started noticing a pattern of sort of a demand in e-commerce that felt way more urgent than in any other industry. Right? Like, I mean, ultimately, if you want to build something interesting, people have to want to buy it. And if you're building something really cutting edge, you want people whose desire for the product is greater than their fear of it failing, right? And in e-commerce, we saw that. Like, people were just like desperate for some solution, and they were willing to take a chance on us. They were willing to work with us. They were willing to pilot with us, and take the risk of it failing because they needed it so badly.
So you're working with a couple companies having these robots in their warehouses, sort the items, which are then taken by people and actually then delivered the last mile, as you were saying. And so at what point did you start to realize that this was, so that this is in the last year or two that you started to realize that this was sort of the area that needed the robots? Why is it that the robots are needed here? Because one of the in that particular spot, because I think there's a conception by a lot of people that, especially those who maybe haven't graduated high school or college, there's a higher unemployment rate, and there are certainly areas of the country where there are higher unemployment rates, and all that stuff that we've talked about before. Like, there's maybe the conception that people should be doing a job like this, but what's the issue? Why is it that people really aren't the best candidate in a lot of ways for this, and the robots are a better candidate?
First of all, there aren't that many people available for the work, right? There's about 900,000 people that work in warehouses, fulfillment centers, supply chain, and that market is growing by 5%. The labor is growing by 5%. Meanwhile, e-commerce is growing at 12% a year, right? So you have two problems. E-commerce is growing 10-12% a year. E-commerce is also very labor intensive, so you need 3 times the labor of regular retail distribution. So really, the market needs to grow at 30-40%, which is not happening, right? So that's one problem. The second problem is the work itself is very, very difficult. I mean, like, we are very blessed. We get to work in very comfortable environments, work with our brains, be creative, and use all that. Whereas in a lot of these situations, you're doing very repetitive, almost like robotic work, like 400 times an hour, 8 hours a day. And I've done that work as part of our customer discovery process. I went and worked at a bunch of warehouses, and it is exhausting work. It's really hard work. So it's not fun work. There's no upward mobility, and so it doesn't attract a lot of people that want to come do the job. And so retailers just can't hire people fast enough.
Got it. Yeah, I think one of the other things about robots is that they're gonna take human jobs, and we know that they will be replacing humans in some jobs, but they will also be opening up jobs as well, like the robot pilot, which we've talked about a lot. So the robot, what is the robot pilot, and how does that fit into the situation with your robot?
So I guess let's start with, as I mentioned earlier, we use a lot of today's different types of AIs, whether it's machine learning, deep learning, reinforcement learning. We use all those to control the robot. Now, all those algorithms are extremely data hungry, right? And there's no existing data set like ImageNet or these other data sets to train the robots. So we need a way to provide the robots with data. Our idea was that if you remotely control a robot with a human, the robot essentially has a human brain. And then we can intercept all those control signals, the control signals that go to the manipulators and the arm and the vision systems, and use that to train the algorithms so that they start acting more human-like. So we have a robotic control center, just like a call center, that is staffed with lots of pilots, and they're available to control any robot anywhere in North America.
Well, you're Georgia, where you're in a couple different places.
We're in Tennessee right now, and we're looking at a few other locations that are confidential.
Yeah. And where are the pilots of those robots?
The pilots are usually in. Right now, we have one pilot center in Toronto, and we occasionally pilot them from San Francisco. But they can be anywhere. They're just controlled over the internet. So we have these human pilots that are available in these call centers to control the robots. So when the robots run into a problem, they will call home and get connected to a pilot, and the pilot then is able to help the robot do the task. And that becomes the training data.
How did you sort of okay, so this is being done well, we know you're working with Gap and some others that we can't discuss, but how similar, I know you probably can't really answer this question, but maybe you can sort of guesstimate. Amazon is obviously a 900-pound gorilla in this conversation. They've been pretty expressive about how they are using robots in possibly a similar way. I know you probably don't really know much about what's going on over there, and most people don't, but to what extent is how similar is what you're doing to what Amazon may or may not be doing? What a question. What can you say about Amazon?
Well, what we can say about Amazon is Amazon is as a company, I love Amazon as a company. Like, it's a great strategic story to learn from. They are experimenting with all kinds of different systems. And you see that popping up in some of their patents from time to time. Now, what specifically they're going forward with, I don't know. Maybe they'll copy us, maybe they'll do their own thing, who knows? But I know they are aggressively exploring robotic solutions. Like, they use almost 100,000 robots today in their fulfillment centers. And what it allows them to do is, whereas every other retailer needs at least 2 hours to ship a product, at least, if not more, they can ship a product in 15 minutes because they have these robotic systems to do it.
Good Lord. So that's great. When we talked earlier, you had mentioned that there are other types of companies, not just retail, but there's other sort of areas that Kindred is looking at for possible usage of these types of robots in Europe and different places. Tell me a little bit more about that side of things.
Right. So what's been interesting the last couple of years is we are getting inbounds from multi-billion-dollar companies from across the world. So we're working with folks in Japan, China, Germany, France, India, and in every one of these markets, it's the same problem. They can't find labor. They're looking for robotic systems to do all kinds of different tasks. So we're talking to automotive manufacturers. We're talking to advanced manufacturing systems. We're talking to retailers as well. Some healthcare. It's essentially literally any job where a human is doing some physical task that is hard to automate because it's kind of variable or it requires manipulation. Like there's about 3 trillion of these jobs. Pretty much any of those tasks.
What might some of, so the task that your robots are doing now is they're sorting different different items that will go into orders that you're ordering from the Gap or wherever. But what are some of these other possible things that people would be doing that robots can now possibly do?
Sure. So if you think about, if you look at car manufacturing, 80% of the cars manufactured by robots. The last 20% is done by humans. And part of that involves bringing together all the little pieces that go into the car, the knobs, the mirrors, all the little things, and then assembling them into the car, right? So you have, our robots could be doing that, preparing that kit of parts that goes with the car, and our robots can also do that final step of assembling that tiny little part. And BMW is exploring that final step. Tesla is exploring the kitting step. So that's one example.
All right, start preparing any questions you might have on robots for George here. Working with companies to actually, bring these to a warehouse or wherever. What's it like? How is that process? How do you do that? How do you get robots set up with in these different use cases with these different companies?
So I'm not a roboticist or an AI person actually. I've kind of learned on the job. I come from the enterprise SaaS world, so a lot of our product design has been actually influenced by SaaS. So the way we've designed our robots, traditionally, if you install a robot in your warehouse, you have to buy all the robots, buy all the hardware. You have to spend 9 months programming it, and you have to pay a engineering services company millions of dollars to get it set up. We have a completely different model. So we have robot as a service.
It's just like a RaaS company.
Yeah, it's a RaaS company. So it's kind of like AWS if you think about it. We don't sell the hardware. We sell the service.
You do it by the hour.
We do it by usage.
Oh, by usage.
Yeah. So if you sort 10,000 items, then you pay for 10,000 items. We also have designed the robot in a way that you can literally roll it off a truck, roll it into the warehouse, plug it into the wall, connect it to the Wi-Fi, and you're up and running, right? So very like plug and play. So that way, you're not even thinking of this as a robot, you're just thinking of this as the thing that does the thing, and you pay for usage.
Great. All right, great. Let's see, any questions from the audience?
Hi. So I have a question just in general. You know how we talk about AI replacing jobs and taking away jobs, but also creating a bunch of new jobs. But a point that I want to bring up, but a lot of the jobs that will be created were not going to be replaced by the same people that the jobs are being taken away from. As in, such as manual labor the people doing manual labor are not going to be the ones getting their jobs back by the new ones that are created that need a little more education or maybe experts to work with AI and actually create the software or things such as that. So what are your thoughts on that?
It's a wonderful question. So where I start from is I believe that every human being has the capacity to do pretty much anything, right? It's just a matter of how much training you have. So that's number one. Number two, while AI and robotics is advancing, there's still a lot of time before it becomes good enough to fully replace human labor. So it's still like 10, 20 years before. So what you're going to see is a gradual shift over the next 10, 20 years. So we have 10, 20 years to retrain people on the new types of jobs, right, in an incremental way. So what we do tactically is we are working with our clients to retrain their staff on working with the robots. So as of today, like one of our robots allows one of their warehouse workers to do the work of 4. So rather than having to hire those 3 additional people that they can't find, this one person can now can produce more. So if they produce more, then they can actually earn more, so their salary goes up. And we work with the clients to retrain those people on how to interact with the robot, how to do it safely, how to provide feedback for those. So that's one thing we do. The second thing we're doing is our robot pilot program is actually more of an apprentice program. So people come in to work to teach the robots how to do things. So they work with our machine learning team, they annotate the data, they provide feedback on the algorithms, are they working well, are they not working well. And they also do projects like coding, UX development, and all that. So we can actually train them through apprenticeship work to do the new jobs. So I think a lot of what we're doing is we are trying to try different ways to retrain people, because I do believe it's about retraining. And then we're helping our clients do that. And hopefully one day we can influence policy and make education more available and affordable.
To what extent are these robot pilot, it's like playing video games. I remember you saying it might be a little bit like that. To what extent are you just basically getting to sit back and play video games, only it's a real life robot?
It's actually very much like that. When we started with VR headsets. So you would wear a VR headset, you'd get immersed in the robot, and you would kind of just use your arms to control it. Pilots got nauseous after an hour, so we moved away from that. But it is very much like a VR interface. You have your robot screen, you get points, you have like metrics around how fast you're working, and what organically happened was that the robot pilots started competing with each other. So that happened. And secondly, the robot pilots are actually the most satisfied employees in the company. They love the job because they get to play with its interface. And the guy that's leading the robotic pilot team, he's a game designer. So he's actually designed the interface to be very game-like.
Awesome. All right, more questions. I saw somebody up over here. You up there, yell.
Yeah, what's the typical cost
In terms
for
of
picking pack?
since the robots you have to charge them or have different special type of batteries, how are you gonna deal with the environment?
Okay, so if robots require a lot of energy through batteries, what have you, how are we going to, what's the environmental cost of that sort of thing?
So I would say our robots, the first set of robots we're doing, they're not powered by batteries. They're plugged into the wall. They're static robots, so they're working in a static station, and you can move them around, but you move them and you plug them back into the wall. So those are the first generation of robots. For the mobile robots, I mean, they would be powered by the same batteries that you power electric cars. So as electric cars get widely adopted and that technology advances, we'll be leveraging those same type of technologies.
So this isn't like mining Bitcoin where it's this tremendous environmental drain or et cetera.
No.
Okay. Okay, awesome. Other questions?
Yeah, this is Brian Wong with Next Big Future. I had a question. There seems to be a large gap. You talked about 10, 20 years until there's widespread adoption of robots in the industry. But we have like 4 billion smartphones, and then we have only about 20, 30 million vacuum robots, which are, I think, one of the largest consumer areas of robots. So there still seems to be a gap of like 100x between the vacuum robots and mobile phones. So there seems to be, there was talk before about just putting the smartphone, the tablet, as the head of a mobile robot, but that hasn't really happened. So there seems to be some kind of gap there between what could be a widespread adoption versus what's actually happening. Do you see some issues, some barriers that need to be overcome, or just a matter of some hits? What do you see happening in the consumer side?
Yes, there are 4 billion smartphones, but most of the robots that are deployed today, yes, you have the vacuum robots in consumer world, but you have millions of robots in industrial settings, right? So a vacuum robot might cost $1,000, but an industrial robot costs like $100,000. So it's a pretty gigantic market of hardware. Now, we moved away from consumer because the hardware wasn't at a price point that the average consumer will buy, right? So a vacuum robot just moves around, sucks up stuff, but a useful home robot has to be able to manipulate things. It has to be able to get you a beer, open a door, etc. The cost of a robot to do that today is about $100,000. No consumer is spending $100,000 to buy that kind of a robot for their home. So what we've done instead is we're focusing on the industrial sector, which is demanding a lot of these robots. And as that spreads, it's going to drive the cost down, right? So China is investing hundreds of billions of dollars in robotic manufacturing and AI, and they're driving down the cost of the hardware quite significantly. So we start there, cost goes down, more people adopt it, cost goes down further, and eventually in 10 years, 20 years, we'll get to a point where it's more like the price point is closer to a smartphone and can start being deployed in homes. So yeah, it's just a matter of time.
Next Big Future, that's a really good site. I like that one, it's solid. Nextbigfuture.com. Okay, so our time is up. If everyone could please give a nice round of applause for George Babu.